there was a big group of us at the Science and Non-Duality Conference who we casually came together at the end of the conference, and we realized that there was this great deal of confusion going on in various spiritual teachers' lives, and there was a need for a greater ethical awareness. And so some of the founding members, Jack O'Keefe, Rick Archer, and I, we sat down, and there was a couple other people there that began to talk about creating a code of ethics, with the sole intention of helping teachers to educate themselves, so that they could bring forth a greater ethical awareness and create less harm. This was right in the that time of the Me Too movement. There was, all kinds of things going on in different spiritual communities where there wasn't appropriate ethical boundaries. And of course, this type of thing has been going on for thousands of years. But we thought it would be wonderful to bring forth something to create a greater sense of professionalism for ourselves and for our communities.
And wasn't it a happy coincidence? 4 or 5 of us had individually prepared talks to give at that 2017 SAND conference, highlighting these issues around how Western spirituality hasn't addressed ethics at all. Yet, without prior consultation, we were talking about the same thing, coming from a different angle, each of us. And then happily, it's like, how come we're all talking about the same thing? So it's like a converging of ideas. And it was beautiful that the APST was born at that lunch meeting. I suppose from myself, my own angle at that conference was to speak about the birth, the origin of teachings, of how they came through from the East to the West. Of course, there's been great saints, great teachers through the centuries, but invariably, in order to protect the teachings, the shadow side of the teacher was always denied, was never explored. So you find ancient teachers who are on this pedestal that had nobody to talk to themselves, that had no way of finding support for their own growth. So it was assumed that they don't need to grow at all, that it's all done. The thing is, human evolution is ongoing. Unless you want to lock yourself away in an ashram and not engage in any regular life, which of course breeds its own problems. So there's been a cultural transition that's required now to address, to put Western ethical good practices, integrity, honesty on every aspect of spirituality. And sure, it's there in some traditions in the East, but we need to be overt about it and open and honest about it in our culture.
And absolutely, the big thing that came forward for me when I was a young spiritual student, before I began teaching, what I realized was, I could experience great levels of personal sense of freedom, and I was having these awakening experiences, but my personal life and my human shadow, it in no way matched, what I was experiencing in these inner worlds. And what I found was I needed to do deep psychological work in order to address, my own personal wound, my shadow. And if I did not address that, it was going to show up not only in my personal life, but in my teaching life. And so for me, like what you were describing, Jack, I developed this real sense of synthesis between, Western psychology and psychotherapy, and work with the shadow, work with our humanity, work with this ongoing sense of evolution, along with these great spiritual teachings, spiritual awakening and experiencing peace and compassion and freedom, and bringing these two worlds together. And so at some point I studied, I got a master's degree in psychology. And what I did as a teacher is I just took my ethical standards that I had working as a psychotherapist, and I just projected those onto my spiritual teaching career. And this created a great sense of harmony for me. But what I realized was there was many of my colleagues who didn't study ethics, who didn't have this ethical support, who didn't have a code to live by. And then unfortunately, they were getting themselves in some, semi-messy situations or really messy situations. And then, of course, as a therapist, I found myself not only working with my students, but I was working with students from teachers, across the board, whether they came from Catholicism and experienced, pain from the church, or teachers in non-duality or Buddhism or the yogic traditions, and so I was having to hold all of this within me. I mean, that's kind of the work that you do as a therapist, is people tell you things in confidence, and then of course you can't go out and share that. But I realized that one of the gifts that I could offer, one of the things that we could do together, is if we created an educational platform to help address this need, then there would be less suffering for our communities. And so this is what's driven me forward, not any sense of policing or blaming or judging other teachers, but rather offering something supportive so that all of us together can grow, through a greater sense of education and embracing this quality of ongoing, interior investigation and evolution.
Yeah, there's another component as well, isn't there? Where when you go to that level of unity consciousness, and you know that your mind is creating the world, and you know that your own perception is the authorship of your reality. And when you're hanging out in that unified field, the non-dual state or the natural state or unity consciousness, all these different terms for the same point of perception. In that state, of course, when you're attached to that state and you haven't gone prior to that level of consciousness, the unreality of your phenomenal life, of your story, of your wounds, the unreality of it is blatantly obvious. So it seems like it's not important. It's not real. I don't have to heal that. That doesn't happen anyway. So all these non-dual concepts can then be applied to hide the shadow, to really create a huge blind spot. And, some of us stay in that unified field of perception for a long time, where you never get to integrate the unified field and the separate field. They're two lenses of perception. One isn't better than the other. They're both just two lenses of perception. Whereas getting some distance where there's no attachment from any lens of perception, you get to see, gosh, even the most tiny grain of sand that's in your shoe from some piece of trauma, it's going to look for resolution. It is. And to dismiss it because of the unreality of it, or because it's created by memory, by trauma, it's held in your brain, it's held in the body, therefore it's not really important. Therefore it is important because it's going to come out somewhere. Every unresolved dysfunction is going to come through somewhere. And invariably, it will create suffering to somebody else until we heal everything in ourselves. And I don't think we'll ever actually be totally healed, because the openness and the willingness to always evolve doesn't require you to be fully healed ever. You come to wholeness, you come to self-love. And then the personal me, myself story, of course, reduces in volume. But there must be an openness to always look at ourselves so that we can be better human beings, better versions of ourselves, deepen our understanding of love and compassion and how other people view the world. And, we can walk with less of a footprint,
I think what you're saying is so true. What I've always seen on the path is just this sense of when we do interior work on our humanity, when we work, to look at our shadow and simultaneously work to awaken, out of the humanity. When we do these two together, they are mutually supportive. Spiritual work and psychological work are mutually supportive.
Yes.
This is the dance of Shiva and Shakti, the dance of opening into vast spacious emptiness and simultaneously giving birth into form. And as long as we're in form, we are in an evolutionary world. And this is something that I was quite confused about as a young student on the path, as I'd see these incredible teachers And then I would hear, these horrible stories about, what they had done with their students or this or that. And it never made sense to me fully. But the more I was able to embrace my humanity and see, oh, we're all human, we all have shadows, we are all evolutionary beings, then it started to make sense. And to me, it was really clear that the more, willing we are to do this personal individual work, that lays a greater foundation for the experience of abiding awakening, for the experience of unity consciousness, because we're not being, shooken out of unity consciousness by some great shadow or some huge wound or, a spiritual community, falling apart around us. And so to me, all these forces work together. And it's a great gift of humility that, we as teachers can step down from our thrones and to see ourselves as, oh, look, I'm a human being too. And what do I need to grow? What do I need to support myself? Or can I be a great support, to a friend who's reaching out to me? And see, this is what the APST is really about, is this sense of supporting each other, admitting our humanity and growing together while simultaneously honoring our divinity. And so to me, it's a beautiful thing. I think it's one of the great prerequisites of any good teacher, is to have a deep and profound sense of humility and a willingness to share and to meet from this place of humility, and to have this attitude of ongoing growth and investigation, like you were describing, forever. It's a beautiful thing, Jack.
And I think it's about honoring our humanity, because it can be denied. The body can be denied in order to transcend I am the body identification, but it has to be reintegrated again at some point and seen and understood for what it is, as a beautiful, exquisite, self-healing mechanism. But it holds a lot of trauma. It holds the stories. And so in the loving that comes from source, from all of it, the loving that comes, how is it going to continue to deny the existence of the body? It's about integrating it, pulling it all in, And one other thing there, to comment on what you're saying about, maybe traditional teachers in the past who were behaving badly, but had exquisite teachings. Written into the approach of how to deal with the teacher is the guru's always right. It is your own perception that is a bit off in some way, that to understand what the teacher is doing might be outside of the student's capability. Oh gosh, I get where that's valid, and luckily the teachers I had weren't behaving badly, and so I adopted those beliefs and they helped me greatly. If I didn't have a teacher who had integrity, I would have ignored or had a concept that would have forgiven and not questioned what a teacher was doing. I'd like to turn that upside down so that every teacher is accountable and see what happens, because it might create a bit of chaos. It might create a situation where no student trusts any teacher. It might create a situation where we're constantly kind of having to explain ourselves and be bombarded by all kinds of criticisms that are just projections from students. That's fine. Let's just take it on the chin and see what happens. A big flushing out, I think, needs to happen now, so that we can find a place of balance. So we can find and redefine a new cultural context for spiritual teachings, for spiritual practice that has integrity, that has honesty, that honors our humanity, that honors our divinity, that sees what is prior to both and all the lenses, that lets us be responsible. And I've worked with teachers who've said, and I've said this myself a few years back, yeah, but only a teacher would understand this. That's when it smells, nobody.
That's where we begin to get ourselves in trouble.
Then we're in trouble. If we have a little qualifier, but nobody will understand why I'm doing this, it's like, okay, that's a red flag. That's a red flag. And that's rampant in the sector at the moment. And I did that for a while myself. I didn't realize it was actually a blind spot. So There's much work to be done, but it's a really exciting time because it's about, hey, be honest, be open, let it rip, see what's going on for you. Let's have, this community for teachers where we can just be there for each other and just say, yeah, what's it like for you? What is the experience of awakening like? Is it different to what they said in the books? And for most, yes.
And I think it's so true to let go of that mythological understanding of, say, what enlightenment or spiritual awakening or unity consciousness, how it's actually experienced, in human form, in a day-to-day life with children, with relationships, with a, busy teaching schedule or whatever it is, in 2018. And I think that's one of the great things that's coming forward, especially with, something like the Me Too movement, is this sense of, it's this invitation for everyone to step into a greater level of integrity and humility. And like, we were speaking about coming down off the throne, like the guru throne, to let go of that old model. And yes, it may have served wonderfully in the past. Now, of course, there's ways in which it did not serve wonderfully. And we don't need to dwell too much on what went wrong. What we're trying to create together is just a greater sense of growth for the soul's sake of how can we show up better. This teachers, it's our job is to serve. That's our job. It's to serve. And so how can we show up and serve in a more efficient way, where we're not having teaching scandals and ethical nightmares, but can we show up in a way where we respect confidentiality, where we see our students' divinity, where we see that they are equal to us, where we show up from a place of absolute honesty and integrity, and to admit the human condition, and not only to admit it, but to embrace it from a place of love and compassion. All of this is growth oriented, and that's the purpose together. Even within our creation of the Code of Ethics, it wasn't like just you and I created it. There's been input from so many individuals. And together, all of us, have spent, the good part of this last year just trying to put together one draft. And I think that's a beautiful thing, that we can sit with this, we can investigate it, we can, get input from all these different sources and grow as a community. And this is the spirit of our organization, is to grow as a community. There's no sense of one person has, the all in all, the crown jewel ethical code that we all must bow down before. There's a sense of this co-creation together. And, I've learned so much, throughout this year. And I think all of us have been given this opportunity to really sit with it, to contemplate it, to gnaw on it, to let it digest, and to see, are we living up to this? And what can we do personally to improve in our teaching lives and in our personal lives? And it's a beautiful journey. It's an exciting journey, and it's an honest journey as well.
Yes. And also, in the sharing of what's going on for us as people, we've got to find a balance, because this is unknown territory. This hasn't happened before, where we find, how can my professionalism be enhanced? Can I get ongoing support? Can I get trained? Let's say my boundaries are a mess. Boundaries are learned. A lot of people don't know about it. What can we do around the power that is given to a teacher? Some of us are very uncomfortable with it. Some others completely abuse it because they don't know how to deal with that energy. So we have to find a way that our professional lives are not explored in front of teachers, in front of students, but in front of teachers with our peers. It's about peer support. It's about sharing it with each other so we can maintain a professionalism when we're with students. I would hate if teachers started vomiting their stuff while they're working with students. There's a danger of that too. It's about maintaining the professionalism, but providing the place, offering a new normal of how teachers can be supported in their own growth. the first step is acknowledging that growth needs to happen and that it's an ongoing thing, and to embrace it, and to stop imagining that we have to be, perfect human beings. Humanity is imperfect. That's the thing that keeps evolving. It can't arrive at perfection. It is imperfect because its raison d'etre is to constantly evolve and grow. So therefore, it doesn't have a perfection. Yet you come to another level of point of view, and there is only perfection. Okay, so how do we work with this paradoxically? I think very easily. If we can find a way to have teachers identify what their learning needs are, identify what their growth needs are, through honesty, through integrity, through loyalty and respect for each other, to help each other in a non-judgmental, supportive way. And then to improve our professional skills. Some of us were trained in group work, some not at all. We seem to have inherited a way of dealing with groups. Maybe there's another system altogether that would be better for students and for teachers. So I'd love to break the old model, just break it, but yet acknowledge the beauty of it. Transmission happens. Doesn't have to be this huge, enormous, glittery gold specialness. It's just an energetic thing that happens. So just to integrate everything in a more equal basis, to normalize spiritual teachers. I think this would serve us all because it allows for more honesty.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing what you're speaking about. I was listening to Tammy Simon from Sounds True speak once, and she said when working with her teacher, she said it was really clear. There was just this sense of, I'm an adult, you're an adult, and let's work together, let's grow together. And I think that is such a supportive, such a supportive way, such a supportive model, for students and teachers to work together. And then we let go of all that sense of projection and confusion and power play and, transference, countertransference, to let go all of that.
Yes.
And of course, if it comes up, to be willing to investigate it, not to abuse it, but to investigate what's going on there. How am I interacting, with my community so that I can better serve, Even this last summer, there's been, a couple communities that have had, tremendous pain within them. And, they need support. They need a supportive container because, like you were saying, some of the teachings are incredible. Just because a teacher makes a mistake doesn't mean all the teachings, are no good. It doesn't mean we need to let go of our relationship with God or the divine or the path, because, something horrible happened within the community. We can grow. And I think it's a beautiful thing that we admit this is an evolutionary world, and to continue to have this conversation. Well, how do we grow together in a way which is supportive for all, is supportive of all? That now we're coming into alignment, with the movement of truth, the movement of divinity, the movement of true spiritual awakening here on planet Earth. And so this is our intention, and I think it's a beautiful endeavor, to be a part of it. I feel so honored to be a part of this group and to be able to take part in this conversation.
It's so exciting what has evolved from a year ago at that SAND lunch, and that we actually, let's make change happen. How do we do it? We're going to have to do it ourselves. And we rose to it. And I hope it has a life, and that it does what we hope it can do for our colleagues and for students, for the whole sector. There's a lot of potential here. Are we on the mark or off the mark? I don't know. I'm not bothered. I'm just giving it a shot. Let's see what happens. And it's really as strong as our membership. Us as members, let's see what we can do for each other. How much of that honesty are we prepared to give to each other through support, through participation, through identifying what it is we want to learn professionally, personally. It's only going to be as strong as the openness and willingness for teachers to step forward as members. And then from a student point of view, every path is different. Of course, you studied, a master's in psychology, so there is that wealth of knowledge and professional expertise there. I went into therapy at 19 and spent years in therapy before any interest in the spiritual path cracked open or was made aware to me overtly. But there are so many that don't go the therapy route at all. And there must be an accommodation of all paths. How can therapy show up in another way, in another guise? And there are a multitude. So it's not that we're advocating therapy, we're advocating awareness, ethical awareness, increased awareness of your humanity, integration of your humanity, honesty, openness, human values. Where's your trauma? Where are your repeated patterns? Where's your attitude? Where is the filter lens that is obscuring a divine movement coming through you? As a teacher, where is it that you get obscured by a personal agenda? And even though you know the personal agenda isn't yours, it can still be there until you unpack. And therapy is one way. There's a gazillion ways of doing it. But we need openness, we need honesty, we need integrity, and we need a supportive environment in order to be able to safely see, own, observe, and release and change those patterns. We can look at it from neurology. Maybe at some points it's literally changing the wiring in our brain. It's neural pathways that were learned when the me, myself, I was in the self-creation, egoic level, building an ego. And then once you know, that's not me at all, goodness me, that's not me at all, but the pattern could still be there because of a neural wiring. So there's so many different ways of approaching this. I think it's important that we extend our understanding that every spiritual path is different and that there may be a gazillion different ways of increasing that personal awareness of our human nature. Different language, even, different contexts of how that can be housed and held and evolved.
I think that's well said, Jack. Like when I reflect on my path, of course, it wasn't just therapy. It was 20 years with a teacher. It was, intense study in yoga and Buddhism and dream work and shadow work and, meeting with, countless healers and professionals and coaches and shamans. And yes, across the board. I think, the big thing is that our organization is about growth, individual growth, professional growth, and how do we show up and serve better? And to continue this conversation around ethics, it's a beautiful thing. And there's been such an outpouring of support from the community. I think collectively, all of us know there's this need there. And there's been so many individuals who've come together, and offered, countless hours of support in this work and investigation. And so I think it's only going to continue to grow because, the need is there. And this is the movement of evolution. This is the movement of God. It's all about growth, ongoing, further and further and further. And so as long as we stay true to that, I think we're headed in the right direction. And so it's a beautiful thing to be a part of. I'm so happy to be having this conversation.
Oh, it's very exciting. It's very exciting. Onward and upward for transparency personally, professionally, and culturally, so that we can see what can this become? What can we do for ourselves, for the sector? What can we do? It's just bursting with potential, and I'm curious to see what's going to happen here. Let it begin, huh? Let's do it. Let's do it.